Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the British Chamber of Commerce for Luxembourg, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the third event of our 2021 Leadership Forum. The Luxembourg Chamber of Commerce is leading the way by actively encouraging its members to implement and to respect sustainable strategies. Having recently published their 10 commandments for sustainable strategy, the Chamber has outlined its guiding principles on ESG, responsible investments, the circular economy, and human rights. Before I hand over to Natalie Gerhardstein, Editor-in-Chief of Delano magazine, to introduce our esteemed speaker, I have a few brief housekeeping matters. So firstly, for your information, we will be recording this morning's event. There will also be a Q&A at the end. If you wish to ask a question, please use the chat or the Q&A function on Zoom. I would also lastly like to thank our sponsors, Alter and Lux States, and also our media sponsor, Delano magazine. Thank you very much to you all. And with that said, I'd now like to hand you over to Natalie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin, and thank you, of course, to the BCC and the Luxembourg Chamber of Commerce today for this wonderful setup that we have. Our guest of honor, of course, probably doesn't really need an introduction, but of course, very much is deserving of one. Luc Frieden serves as chair for the Luxembourg Chamber of Commerce. He's chairman of the board of directors at the Banque Internationale à Luxembourg, the BIL, and is a qualified lawyer and partner at the Luxembourg law firm Elvinger Hoss, where he advises on international, corporate, and banking matters. But most of us probably know him, of course, when he was a cabinet minister for the Luxembourg government between 1998 to 2013, as he served as Minister of Finance, Minister of Defense, and Minister of Justice. So big virtual round of applause, please, for Mr. Frieden. So welcome today to your premises, but welcome in any case.
Thank you.
We're here today to talk about these 10 commandments for sustainable strategy. And for those who might not know about them yet, can you tell us a little bit in a nutshell what they are?
Well, as Colin said, our purpose is to put sustainability at the heart of the corporate strategies of Luxembourg companies for the 10 years to come. Now you could say, what does that mean, sustainability? It's a little bit thinking of the long term, but that's quite broad. So what we did is we put together a number of principles. I prefer, by the way, guiding principles and commandments, because this is not a Bible, not a religion that you have to follow, but you should not just focus on one aspect of sustainability, but on several aspects, to have a holistic view of a number of principles. And these 10 principles center around the role of companies vis-à-vis the planet, vis-à-vis the people. There's an aspect of governance, and there's also an aspect of prosperity, because we are companies, we represent the companies. The Chamber of Commerce, for those who do not know it in Luxembourg, every company by law is a member of the Chamber of Commerce. So companies have as their purpose to make money, to be profitable. Yet at the same time, this brings in, I would say, a medium-term and long-term dimension. And so when you say, what are these principles, without going into the details of the 10 of them, it's what is the corporate purpose? Where do you put this ESG criteria into your corporate strategy? Does the board of the company really take into account this ESG dimension? Do you look at financial objectives while at the same time looking at non-financial objectives? How far can you go in your specific sector on the circular economy? How do you implement the decarbonization of the sector in which you are in the economy? So it's the whole range of topics that you have to bring together. And therefore, for me, the key point is that there are only 10 principles and not 100. Mm-hmm. The second point is that they are interconnected. So not just one, as I said beforehand, but you need to deal with all of them. And I think that is the biggest challenge. And then, again, I would say this is not the program of any political party, but it is for us the objectives that successful companies should achieve to be attractive for their employees, attractive for their clients, and, as I said, to remain profitable in a highly competitive environment. That is to say that you need to invest a lot to achieve these goals, but at the end of that process, and for me, that process, for us, that process is not in 20 years, but in 10 years from now, to be the leader in sustainability in Europe. That's at least the ambition, and in life you need to have some ambitions to achieve something, and that's what the Chamber of Commerce wants to lead and to accompany our members in that process.
Thank you for that. So it's a simple yet complex thing, but let's dig a little bit more into it.
Sure.
You mentioned the member companies, of course. Can you talk a little bit about how the principles themselves were initiated?
Yeah. First of all, when I became chairman of the Chamber of Commerce in 2019, I thought, what are the big challenges of the Luxembourg economy? And I think there are three big challenges. One is the digital transformation. The second one is the ecological transformation. And the third one is the competitiveness of the Luxembourg companies in comparison to the rest of Europe and the world. And in fact, these three go closely hand in hand. On the two first topics, I put in place two working groups, digitalization, ESG, sustainability as a second group. And in the same way as I did when I was a minister, I don't think you should govern from the top down. Of course, the top should lead, but the ideas must come from the bottom. Because in this case, that is the companies. Because it doesn't make sense if in a very ideological, theoretical way, you set certain targets and then you say, à vous de vous débrouiller. I think it's much better that you put companies together, and we are the representatives of the companies. So what we did in that group is that we had about 25 companies from different sectors: industry, transport, and services, mainly financial services. Because for each one of them, the achievement of these sustainability goals are a little bit different. And so out of those discussions, we came in that working group to the conclusion of these 10 principles centered around people, governance, planet, and prosperity, as I said before. So these principles are not theoretical principles. They can be achieved, and they come, in fact, from companies. And what I must say, what was for me very positive, I did not participate in the working groups. I got regular briefings about this. The key companies in all of these sectors voluntarily participated in that working group, in those workshops. And I think that's also a positive sign. It's not that these companies, the industries, the banks, the insurance companies, the transport sector said, this is just theoretical. No, they said, we know this is a big challenge. We support you and you support us in achieving those goals. And that's why they came out with this at the end of the day, which is a compromise indeed, but it's a realistic compromise. Because I would like to add something else. You need to have an ambition, you need to have a roadmap, but the roadmap also needs to be realistic. Because it's one thing to say, as of tomorrow, all the trucks need to drive by batteries, with batteries or hydrofuel. That doesn't work like that. So you need to have a target, and you need to see with each sector how to achieve the target. But if you don't have targets and if you don't have principles, you will never achieve those targets. And that's why I think that we launched a dynamic which some companies had already embarked upon, but now we have to work together with the companies to implement that.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like you had a lot of interest at the start across these various sectors. Can you talk about sort of how much interest the principles have garnered so far and sort of the communication plan behind from the point of view of the Chamber of Commerce?
First of all, this got a lot of attention, both by our members and by the outside world. And that's why probably we are talking about it today at the British Chamber of Commerce as well. So a lot of people are talking about this. And I would say a lot of companies had been doing quite a number of things. It's not so that the Luxembourg companies only discovered ESG now. I grew up in the south of this country where there's the steel industry. The steel industry 100 years ago was a very social company. They built houses, schools, swimming pools for the people who work there. So that was a social dimension. What is new, I think, is that we bring together social, environment, governance, or as I said, planet, people, prosperity, and governance, to bring all that together. Now, since we published these principles, we enter in a lot of discussions with the companies. And obviously the next stage is, and we are working on that, is to organize workshops again with the companies who are interested to help them implement those principles. Because the Chamber of Commerce is a service provider to our members. And so we are organizing training for the people, discussions on what does it mean, for instance, if you take the corporate purpose. What is the bigger purpose of each and every company? I think that has to be defined within the company, within the sector. And for that, in the near future, we will organize a workshop where we have already quite a number of registrations of companies, again from different sectors, who will together exchange experiences, tell us what they think internally about this, and I think thereby we can help other companies to go along that road towards the goal of 2030, because that's a little bit the time frame that we have in mind to achieve this goal and to put really sustainability at the heart of the work of our companies.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the workshops, sort of when they're taking place, and also then it's, I assume, not just the original 25 or so companies that were involved, but it's the next layer?
Sure. We have about 90,000 members. Not all of them obviously will attend there, but the goal is really to take these main principles, these 10 principles, which by the way you find on the website of the Chamber of Commerce, and then to go a little bit deeper into what that means for the various sectors. And in addition, we work closely with the INDR, the Institute for Sustainable Development, which is in fact a daughter company, if I may say, of the Chamber of Commerce and the Chamber of the Crafts people, Chambre des Métiers. So we are not doing this alone, but we are leading this process. And I think that's our role, and I'm very optimistic that we will achieve something substantial there. I think, again, already the Sustainable Business Principles that we published in several languages is the start for that. But again, the implementation is difficult. The pace must be adjusted to the various sectors. We need to invest a lot. If I say we, I think both the state and the private companies. This is a huge effort. It's a little bit like a war effort, you know. After the war, the economy had to be built up. Now, I think, in order to achieve what we want to achieve in the companies, that requires a lot of research and development, a lot of investment in the best technologies, and that obviously has to be supported by the state. Otherwise, we will not achieve this. But if we achieve it, and that is what I said at the beginning, there's a real ambition behind that, because if we achieve it, we can have Luxembourg as a leading economy once again in Europe, at least in the sectors where we are very strong. And I think that would make us more competitive than others, and by that we can contribute to the prosperity of the whole country in creating jobs and having good salaries, and all that comes as a consequence of competitive companies.
You talk a bit about the public sector, of course, but I want to talk about how the initiative sort of has helped crowd in private players. I mean, because of course it's important that the private and public sectors work together. Can you comment on that?
Sure. I think we did this mainly also because we do not want only the public sector to impose certain things on the private sector. And I can say that easily as a former minister. I think you govern best if you listen to the needs of the private sector. Obviously, the legal framework is defined by the European institutions and by the national authorities, but ideally after listening to the private sector. So what I said as chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, I do not want to wait until Brussels, the European institutions, and Luxembourg will have ended their work, and then they just send us the directives and the laws and we implement them. I think it's much better if in the various sectors in which Luxembourg is strong, we try to do our homework, and that we can a little bit give inspiration to the public sector in what they should do, in what they can do, and where it is realistic. That requires a lot of dialogue. This dialogue is taking place, in particular in the sectors which have the biggest challenges, such as industry or transport, but the dialogue could still be improved because sometimes it sounds a little bit too theoretical what is proposed. It's not enough to say the target is 55% of reduction, like the Fit for 55 program of the European Union, but what does that mean for the steel industry? What does that mean for the trucks that bring the food for us from Rotterdam to Luxembourg and elsewhere? All this still has to be discussed, and I think the public sector should support with either subsidies or tax incentives this huge digital and ecological transformation of the Luxembourg economy.
Great answer. And do you think there's been some renewed focus on these sort of principles then, obviously, since the pandemic's taken hold and we've seen some environmental maybe changes and companies shifting somewhat to react to what clients are asking for?
Indeed, I think that the past 5 to 10 years have raised awareness about climate change, but also about the role that companies have to play in the broader society. Companies are really leading, actually, society to the extent that almost everybody works in a company. So we have a huge role in society, of course, of making money, and that money, of course, will be distributed among shareholders, employees, but also the broader society. And I think that exercise came about in an almost natural way. And obviously, the pandemic, but also these floods and everything that we experienced showed to those who were not yet convinced that we are rather weak vis-à-vis the nature, and that we have to take into account the broader dimension. How can we be competitive, profitable, without harming the natural resources and the environment too much? I think that is the big challenge. At the same time, how can we achieve progress? And that's why I do not think that this is a program for those who only want to live in a very natural way and do not want to progress. No, I think with technological innovation, with artificial intelligence, if we use it in the right way, we can achieve a lot also in a sustainable manner. And then we have to learn from the others. We have to learn from other companies, from other countries. And I see also the role of the Chamber of Commerce a little bit in demonstrating, showing what others are doing. We will, in the near future, publish one of our publications about examples of Luxembourg companies in the circular economy. That is our publication, Actualité et Tendance, and I think there you can also find inspiration for your own company. And so again, we want to be, as a Chamber of Commerce, give a hand to the companies to lead into this goal. We want to talk to the government what is realistic, and we want to share with our members experiences on what they could do for their own sector.
Wonderful, thanks.
So it's a big project. It's a very big project, but I think if we succeed, it will make Luxembourg an even more attractive place to work and to produce products and services.
Okay. And you mentioned the ambition behind this. I want to zoom in for one moment, not to get too granular, and then maybe zoom out again. But I noticed in the principles that you've produced that there are benchmarking recommendations, for example, and a number of partner companies. So there's a lot of work, it sounds like, behind the scenes that was done on your side here at the Chamber, huh?
Yeah, and for some, that's true. That's exactly what we are doing. But at the same time, let us not forget that at the European level, a number of these principles are already enshrined in European directives, in European laws. The financial sector, I think, went quite far in that direction already. If you take the investment fund sector, in which Luxembourg, as you know, is one of the leaders, the investment funds already today need to have an ESG policy, need to indicate whether what kind of investments they are doing, and all that has to be published. So there is already a legal framework in place. But again, we think it's not enough to have the laws. And before the laws, even we want to be in a certain leadership position. And for that, obviously, you need to have targets, you need to have benchmarks, you also need to be, I have to insist on that again, you have to be realistic, because it doesn't make sense if you just say, do something if the technology is not there. So the pace to achieve this is crucial, and that needs to be discussed with the companies, because if that is not done well, you will simply have a delocalization of companies from Luxembourg to other countries in Europe or elsewhere, and by that you destroy jobs and you will not achieve anything. So I think there needs to be an intensive discussion between the European institutions, the Luxembourg government, and the representatives of the private sector to go this way together.
Can you talk from your own personal standpoint, sort of how optimistic you are on reaching objectives, for example, up to 2030 and beyond?
I'm an optimist, and I know that you can achieve a lot, both in politics and in the private sector. I have, in my short life, experienced so many things that Europe could do, that Luxembourg has done, and which led to the success which we have today from an economic perspective in this country, and also in the companies. We have leading companies in many sectors in Luxembourg. And so if you have a clear target, I think this is achievable. At the same time, as I said, it requires a lot of investments. You know, you cannot have electrical cars if you do not have all the charging stations. Now we know that there should be many more of these charging stations along the roads and highways of Luxembourg. Every 60 kilometers you should have this. So that requires investments now. It requires support of R&D in our companies, and it requires a clear strategy. I see, for instance, that the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, and I happen to sit on the board of the Stock Exchange, we launched years ago already the Luxembourg Green Exchange. It has defined clear criteria, what is green and what is not green. The taxonomy of the European Union helped in that context as well. And we became a leader in the listing of sustainable bonds in Europe and even above, beyond that. So yes, I think this can be achieved, but it's a very difficult, challenging path ahead. It will not go just with publishing principles. The implementation is key. But again, it's also required by the customers of our companies, and I think by many of the employees who want to work in companies who play a positive role in the development of society.
And do you think employees are also helping to push and to shift that change then?
Obviously, the boards of the companies, the management committees need to make this part of their focus. And again, that goes hand in hand with keeping companies profitable. So it's not just something that you do on Saturday afternoons when you have done all the rest. It has to go hand in hand. And then I think you have to involve, obviously, your staff, because your staff very often is also among your customers, or they bring the feedback from the street. You have to talk to different age categories in your company, because that might, the focus might be a little bit different depending on on where you come from geographically, but also your social background or your age category you're in. So yes, I think one of the 10 principles is also to make sure that your employees, your staff, join you in this effort. And I think, by the way, any modern company works in a way that it always needs to include the staff. The most successful companies that I observed are always those that where there might be a hierarchy, but at the same time, the targets that the company wants to achieve are broadly shared by the majority of the employees.
Great answer, thank you. Can we talk a little bit more now about sort of Luxembourg more broadly speaking, where this sort of puts us in terms of markets the country in a way, and how did the initiative really capitalize on Luxembourg's already existing ecosystem?
I think we have an economy that is quite successful, and I think we can be proud about what Luxembourg has achieved over the past 50 years, I would say. We are strong in certain sectors, and we need to keep that competitive advantage. Sustainability is, of course, only one aspect of that competitive advantage for the future, while at the same time we need to make sure that we use all the actors of that ecosystem, as you call it, to join forces to achieve the sustainability and competitiveness. And I would say, I would add the two. And there is one dimension which we should not forget in this exercise. That is, what is the rest of the world doing? We are talking here about Luxembourg, but Luxembourg companies are, by their very nature, very international companies. Most of what we produce is being exported, and most of what we consume is being imported. So I think the aspect of competitiveness vis-à-vis other countries in Europe, but also vis-à-vis China, vis-à-vis the United States, is something that we should not leave out of sight, neither when it comes to sustainability, nor when it comes to other topics such as taxation, corporate law. We need to be better than the others because we are small, and if you are small, you need to have the legal tools in place to be more competitive than the others. That means to be attractive, so that others say, well, I do not go there because of the size of the market, but because of the ecosystem, the infrastructure that goes with it, also the IT infrastructure, 5G, everything like that. So all that needs to come together with what we said during this talk about sustainability.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And in the context of this series that the British Chamber is running, obviously, it's sort of in the run-up to the COP26 taking place as well, when you mentioned the international. Did you have any comments on that, so far as a little preview?
Well, I think, by the way, that conference is very important because we are in a process that was launched in Paris, and I would even say it was launched long before. But if you are in such a big, ambitious project, I think it's important that you meet from time to time to analyze what has happened so far, and then to prepare for the next step. That needs to be quite specific, quite concrete, at the same time realistic. So the discussion with the private sector seems to me to be extremely important. And the third reason why I think such a conference is important is that the whole world needs to share the same objectives, again, to avoid also unfair competition. And the more countries you have around the table, the better you achieve these common goals worldwide.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Thank you. If companies are interested in sort of getting on board with this, either through the workshops or just to get a feel for what the principles are all about, what would you say the best way to do that would be?
Call or email the Luxembourg Chamber of Commerce. We have a staff who is taking care of all these sustainability issues, which is led by Anne-Marie Lösch. And I think they can guide the companies in this process. And we do that in close cooperation, as I said before, with the INDR, the Sustainable Development Institute, who most people know because of the labels they give. But again, we work hand in hand with them.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. We'd like to pass it now on to Colin to do the Q&A if some member companies who've been participating today have some questions out there. Not sure we can hear you, Colin, sorry.
Thank you, Natalie, very much. As I was saying, Mr. Frieden, thank you very much once again. It's been a great pleasure listening to you this morning, and we do have a very small number of questions from the audience. So listening to you and your introduction, you very clearly articulated the ambition of the Chamber to be a leading light in sustainability here in Europe. But some of the audience would like to understand a little bit more about what Luxembourg is doing, what the Luxembourg Chamber are doing to promote and to share that vision on a European stage.
Well, so far we have been dealing mainly with regard to these principles with Luxembourg, But obviously, I think once we have set up something in Luxembourg, we have to make sure that that is in line with what is being discussed at European level. Obviously, when we elaborated these principles, and you see that, by the way, also there's always a cross-reference to European legislation that is already in place or some that is being discussed right now. Obviously, there we have to bring in our experiences. And as I said, our companies are not national. Most of the companies and most of the members of the Luxembourg Chamber of Commerce, of the British Chamber of Commerce, they are international. So obviously, what is special in Luxembourg, we bring all that know-how from these foreign companies also into our exercise. And then we are a member of the European Chamber of Commerce, of Euro Chambers. I think there also we need to bring in our input, because they obviously also discuss about the Green Deal and other issues with the European Commission. So sustainability is for sure not a Luxembourg thing. It's a European thing, and I would even say it's a global issue. However, our goal is, as Luxembourg Chamber of Commerce, and that is a little bit inherent maybe to what I've always promoted, we need to be among the top in the class. So I want the Luxembourg economy to be better than the neighboring countries. So there is a positive competition here. And why I'm saying that? Because I want Luxembourg to remain an attractive place for doing business. And therefore, we need to deal with all of these aspects of the sustainability principles, not just one of them, to have an environment in which companies can prosper while at the same time taking into account the new ambitions, which is one of sustainability combined with competitiveness.
Super. Thank you, Mr. Frieden, very, very much. It's been a great pleasure again having you speak to the British Chamber this morning. And I'd just like to thank you once again. Before we close, Natalie, thank you also for moderating the discussion this morning with Mr. Frieden. Thanks to all our sponsors and Delano, our media partner. I'd like to just leave you with a few brief words on future BCC events. So, as I mentioned, this is event number 3 of our 2021 Leadership Forum. We do have a further event tomorrow entitled ESG for a Better Tomorrow. What does it mean for today? This will be followed by our in-person event, which will be the end of this week's proceedings, which will be taking place at the Chambre de Commerce on Wednesday evening. Thereafter, we have a sustaining members briefing on the 21st of October, followed by our annual tax lunch, where we will hear from Laura Folds on personal tax changes in Luxembourg. Last, but by no means least, is the greatly awaited and anticipated Christmas lunch. Of course, COVID permitting, we do hope to be able to bring everybody back together once again for the festive period. But as always, please visit our website at www.bcc.lu for more details, or to register for these events. But a great thank you to Natalie and also to Mr. Frieden once again for joining us this morning. Thanks to all of you for joining, and I wish you all and everyone a good rest of the start to your week. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.